Oh, Bert, it's cold. Somebody trying to heat up. Hi, I'm about to tell you about 6 different stories, interrelated. 4 of them take place here on the ice floes of the Weddell Sea, just off the coast of Antarctica. I'll be using images by Frank Hurley and sketches by George Marston from back in 1915, when one of these stories actually takes place. Of these 6 stories, 3 are fact, 3 are fiction, and I'm trying to demonstrate how sometimes life imitates art instead of the other way around. Cut. In 1823, Captain James Weddell, on a sealing expedition in the South Seas, sailed to 78 degrees 15 minutes south, the southernmost latitude that anyone had ever sailed up to that point. The ship he commanded was the Jane. His record would hold for 80 years. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe printed his one and only novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Told in the first person, Arthur and his dog Tiger wind up stowing away on a ship, which was later subject to mutiny and various disasters. Imagine Poe writing about a series of events in 1838 that would not come true for another 46 years. In the book, Poe describes 4 men adrift at sea who decide to draw straws according to the custom of the sea. The person holding the short straw agrees to give up his life to feed the others so they might survive a little longer. In Poe's story, the man who drew the short straw was the same man who suggested it, a man named Richard Parker. Pym and one of his shipmates were rescued finally by a ship called the Jane, which then sailed into the Antarctic regions. So, art imitates life. In 1884, the English yacht Mignonette sank en route to Australia. 4 men in a life raft without proper provisions struggle until they are dying, and there is but one hope: the custom of the sea. But this time they did not draw straws. They reasoned it out logically. The 16-year-old cabin boy had probably ingested seawater and was comatose and would probably not survive the day. This was the brave man to make the ultimate sacrifice for his crewmates. This boy's name was Richard Parker. The rest of the crew was rescued 4 days later. Life imitates art. In 1897, Jules Verne wrote a sequel to Poe's novel, entitling it Le Sphinx des Glaces, or in the American version, An Antarctic Mystery. In this novel, which is about a rescue attempt for Arthur Gordon Pym and the crew of the Jane 14 years after she had disappeared from the world, and a year or 2 after the publication of Poe's work, Verne describes the ship stopping at the whaling station, like Poe, on South Georgia Island before turning south into the Antarctic regions. This is what most whalers and sealers did at the time, before heading into the frozen Antarctic waters, the waters with no people, no other civilization. They would stop at South Georgia Island. This is life. It is natural that art imitates life. The ship finds some of Poe's landmarks, but they are no longer habitable, so it continues south in its search. Then it gets caught on an iceberg and sinks. The crew finds itself adrift on the ice, which is slowly floating by the whims of the currents. They ultimately find a boat and are able to sail north again to safety. It happened pretty much that way 18 years later when Sir Ernest Shackleton made his famously disastrous attempt to cross Antarctica. In December 1914, he stopped at South Georgia Island and got last-minute provisions from the whaling station before taking his ship, the Endurance, into Antarctic waters. He didn't make it to Antarctica, though. His ship was frozen in the pack ice on January 18, 1915. and floated with the ice for 10 months before the ship was crushed and sank to the bottom of the sea. The crew lived on the ice floes for the following 6 months. Life imitates art again. In 2001, Jan Martel published the novel The Life of Pi, wherein the hero is marooned in a lifeboat with a tiger named Richard Parker. They both survived. Art imitates life, imitates art. Pretty cool, huh?